everybody, welcome back to Julia at Home. I'm Julia. I'm a homeschool mom of 4. I have an 8-year-old, a 6-year-old, a 2-year-old, and this little guy is actually almost 2 weeks old. If you follow my channel and you haven't already, you can check out the video where I give the baby update and just a quick homeschool update on where we are. I'll link it above here. This video is going to be the resources we used for medieval Europe. And this was during my daughter's 2nd grade year and my son's kindergarten year. And it's really targeted at the 2nd grader, these resources, and I think they'd be great for any elementary school age. And this encompasses our Knights and Castles unit that we did, as well as several other either mini units or extra resources that we did along with our curriculum. Before I dive into the books and resources, I do want to show you the curriculum we're using again. This is Curiosity Chronicles. This is, I got the digital version and just printed it out. Actually, I'm going to be using this curriculum again for our next year of history, and I actually got the bound versions of the text, but the digital versions of everything else. There's audio, there's student guide and a teacher's guide that have coloring pages and activity ideas and book ideas. It's really helpful. They also have a timeline and timeline cards, which we've used, and I will show that just quickly here. This is going to be a kind of long video with a lot of resources and different topics. So I'm going to have timestamps below. So if you only want to see like one category or topic, you can go ahead and skip ahead and just see that topic. I also try to have as many of the resources as I can linked below. So you can also go down to the description box and see those. I'm going to start with the books on castles. So this is A Year in the Castle. And this is really good for the younger children, although there is some violence, so maybe not too young. My son really enjoyed this, I think, more than my daughter did. He's in kindergarten, or he was in kindergarten when we did this. And so it goes through a year. There's like most months have a page. It looks like there's not February in here. And what's fun about it is it says, like, can you find certain things? So there's just a lot to look at in the pictures, and it's pretty short, which is helpful, and it gives you, an idea for what would happen in a castle. And of course there's an attack, because that's what happens when you live in a castle and everybody's attacking each other. So that's A Year in a Castle. And again, I think this is a good one for the younger crowd. So depending what ages your kids are, that might be a good one for you. Next one is one of my personal favorites. This is better for the older crowd. And this is Castle by David Macaulay. And you'll see a lot of his books pop up in my units because I really like them. This is actually, he went back, most of his books, when he originally did them, were black and white, and he went back and made this one in color. So it's even more beautiful. And it's the story of it's a fictional story, but based on how they would have actually built a castle. So from starting at the very beginning, and it really goes through the different parts of a castle and how they were built, very specifically how they were built, which I think is very cool. And it really was good for learning all the different parts of the castle, especially the defensive. I mean, it's a lot of what a castle is, a lot of defensive parts. It is a little long, so I don't do these in one day. I definitely space them out. And this is one that I read to my kids. I think even with an older kid, it can get a little dry. And so I wouldn't necessarily assign an older child to read this. I think it's better as like a read aloud, just a couple pages at a time. But this was really useful for learning the parts of the castle for an activity that we did later that I will show you once I finish going through these castle books. But I really like this one. This is Miss Frizzle's Adventures Medieval Castles. So you might know Miss Frizzle from the Magic School Bus, and those are all science books, but apparently there's a couple history ones. And this is kind of fun. This is not one that I would go like seek out and buy. Like if your library has it, that's great. I think this was one my parents gifted to us. So it's kind of similar to the Magic School Bus in that there's the text and then there's all the speech bubbles to read as well that kind of help fill out the story. But they end up going back in time to a castle because, of course, Arthur, and it's just not Arthur, Arnold. It's just Arnold. It's not the whole class with Miss Frizzle. And there is good information in here as well. So it's not a bad book. It's just not my favorite. So again, like if your library has it, this is great. But I wouldn't like go out of your way to find it. That's Miss Frizzle Adventures Medieval Castle. I really liked this one. We have also we've done like we've read the Roman Diary and I think Egyptian Diary, and those were like smaller and more chapter book. This one is actually it's bigger and it has like the colored pictures, which I really appreciated. And so, but it's the same format as those in that. Oh, well, let me just show you first too. I also really like that there's this map at this picture with the key to show you all the different parts of the castle. So that's cool. And then it's the journal of a page that goes to the castle. So you're learning along with him as he's learning how the castle works, and it's his diary. So it's story format. I think it's really engaging. I think it's a good living book, and I do like the pictures in it. It really helps it come to life as well. We didn't end up using this one as much because we had so many castle resources, but this is really beautiful. This is Stephen Biestes, I'm not sure if I'm saying that right. Cross Sections Castle. And this is it's basically a beautiful reference book. So we didn't read this all the way through, but we did like kind of look at the pictures. There's a lot in here. So yeah, this is good, I think, just to have on hand as a reference book, if you want that. And again, there's a lot of information here, and probably too much for the younger crowd. So we didn't really end up, we just end up kind of like looking through it and talking about the pictures a little bit. And yeah, I definitely didn't read all this. So there you go. But especially if you have an older child who you maybe want to do some sort of, I don't know, report or project related to castles, this is really good reference for that. This last one's for fun. Now this I didn't actually have when we were doing our Castle and Night unit. It was on my list, and then I ended up not purchasing it because I was worried I was spending too much money. But I ended up purchasing it later because I figured I could also use it when we talk about birds, and my kids love birds. Okay, so this is The Hawk at the Castle, and it's a story of medieval falconry, and it's beautiful. I love this book. Okay. So it's the story of a girl who lives at a castle, and it's her father has a falcon. And so it's got the text here is really, it's actually much shorter than it looks, but it's got all this like information here. So you could just read the shorter text through as a story, or you could go and dive into more of the information. Now my kids, of course, wanted me to dive into the information, so we did that. But were I to like read it over and over again, I probably wouldn't read all the extra information. You could just read it as a story. And the pictures are beautiful. Yeah. So, yep. That's The Hawk of the Castle, a story of medieval falconry. And that's by Dana Smith, and it's illustrated by Bagram Ibatuline. I'm not sure if I'm saying that right, but there you go. It's gorgeous. Before I move on to nights, let me show you a project we did to kind of culminate studying castles. And that is, I asked my children to design their own castles, and I had some requirements for them since we had read the castle book and, well, many castles books, but we knew of some defensive elements. So I asked them to include, I think I was like include at least 3 of the defensive elements we learned about, and then you need to point them out to me. And it needs to have like the basic components of what a castle would need and what the people living there would need to survive. So this is my daughter's. We used the big pieces of paper so they could, you know, draw it big. So, so she's got a portcullis here and murder holes. So those are some of the defensive things in the gatehouse. She's got living quarters and garrison living quarters and the great hall, a garden, a kitchen, the falconry, the dog kennel. They, of course, then added some of their own stuff. In addition to stables here, there is a dragon living quarters, dragon training arena. There is also Pokemon arena, I believe, in Pokemon living quarters. So, oh, a dragon hatchery and a human nursery. So there's all sorts of extra things in here, but I was okay with that as long as they included a few defensive elements, as well as some things like they obviously have a kitchen and a great hall and living quarters and stuff. And I think she also has a moat here in the outer curtain as defense as well. So that was hers. For knights, I'm going to start with my favorite knight book, and that is The Making of a Knight. See, we can see without the glare there. It's by Patrick O'Brien, and it's the story of, I think he starts as a page, or yeah, he wants to become a knight. So it's in some ways actually similar to the Castle Diary, and that one could work for knights as well if you're just doing knights and not castles. But I did put it in the castle unit because it does talk about the castle, and it's called Castle Diary. So this again has beautiful, beautiful illustrations, and there's actually, it's a story, but there's a lot of information they sneak in here, which is pretty cool. These are the different kinds of weapons they might use. So this is by far my favorite knight book. And it's short enough that we read it in one sitting. Wasn't too long, so I recommend this one. This is a reference book, Knights. And I must say, it is a good reference book, but again, it uses reference, so I didn't read it all the way through. It's pretty thick. It's got a lot of information in here. So my kids, I think, really like the horses. So I know my daughter loves horses in general, but I think they both were intrigued by the idea of horses having armor. And it goes through some of the history too. We didn't read the history sections in here as much because we had them already in our curriculum. So in other places. So this was just a good reference book. We read a few of the pages. I think I just let I don't think my daughter wanted to choose, so she might have chosen the horse one. But I let them just choose pages, and then I read those specific pages to them. This is a fun one. This is Knightology. We have several of the ology books. And if you don't know, they have, of course, I'm like missing pieces now, but they have little pockets and things. It is a little dangerous when you have little kids and they like lose pieces and tear things off. So just be aware of that. I've been trying to keep these in the library and away from the toddler, but my son loves to look at them and sometimes takes the pieces out. So this is, I mean, there's just a lot of information in here, and I'm pretty sure it's like supposed to be based on this guy, William Marshall. And I don't think most of these books is like based on a fictional person writing the book, and it kind of, it's not really a diary form, but kind of being about them, but they're not real, but all the information about, like the information that they have here about the squire's training is real, like real information. It's just like the context they put it in to try to make it a little more fun. Again, the flaps. You can see this one got ripped a little bit and taped back in. This one has castle defenses and it goes up like this. So yeah, you get the idea. I think these are beautifully done. I also got my son Piratology, so they have that, and we have Dragonology and Dragonology and Dinosaurology. Dinosaurology has like real information in it, but again, it's a kind of a fictional setting. And then Dragonology is just fun. It's about dragons. So, but this is Knightology because we're talking about knights. So this is Circumference and All the King's Tents. Now this is actually a series about, it's a math, they're math stories, but they're stories. This one is about, they're having, the king is coming for his birthday. They're gonna have a party for him for his birthday, and they're trying to figure out how many guests there are. And so they end up having to group them. And so it's not just tens, but it's also just the decimal system in general. And these are fantastic, fantastic books. So this is the one I was using because it made sense with what I was doing with my son in math. But we have a couple of them. Let me see if I can pull out a few more for you. I showed you this one. This was for our Vikings unit, which again would be medieval Europe, but I did that separately. So I'll link that video and you can check that out. But there's like Circumference and the Vikings map. There's Circumference and the Sword and the Cone. So that's for like the geometric solids. Circumference is the first round table. I think this is the first one. And it really introduces Circumference and Lady Di, and their son is Radius. And this is Circumference and the Great Knight of Angleland. So there's lots of different ones. I think there's more that I don't have yet. But any of these would be good to include in your medieval unit. In conjunction with studying castles and knights, a great thing that you could incorporate is King Arthur. So this is the full King Arthur book. We actually did this as a read aloud earlier in the year. I did end up pairing it more so with the timing of the Celtic unit, because that is what that's kind of the time period that the real inspiration for King Arthur would have taken place during, if that makes sense. But it really is about like knights and chivalry and everything. So you could do this. This was a little, I mean, we followed it. My kids followed it. It was a little harder for them to get through. I would recommend it for older kids, maybe middle school and up, this particular retelling. However, I have Jim Weiss's King Arthur and his Knights, and this is fantastic. We love Jim Weiss and his storytelling, and my kids have listened to this several times during and not during the unit, so this is fantastic. I also have a couple more resources related to King Arthur. So this is the world of King Arthur and his court, and this, I think my father found this and sent it to me. It's beautiful, and it's got so much information in it. So it's not a story, but so this is like a picture of Arthur's Britain, and it's got information on knights and chivalry, and then it goes through some of like the themes and things. So Tintagel, I don't know if I'm saying that right, I apologize. And this is like, this is actually a castle that exists, and that they think was like Arthur's castle in mythology. There's the Sword and the Stone. And it goes through some of the knights and Excalibur, and I'm trying to find here Sir Gawain. So it goes through like a lot of the different things. It just has information on them. So yeah, again, it's not a story, but it's like good if you want more information on anything mentioned within King Arthur. And I think I showed you some of the pictures. I do like the pictures in here. I just think they're pretty. But if you have younger ones, what I would recommend is finding some picture books related to King Arthur. So we have a couple here. This is Young Lancelot. And this is, I know it's like based on, I don't think this story is in the King Arthur books, but anyway, it's a fun adventure story, and my son likes it. So there's that. And then this is the Kitchen Knight, and I'm forgetting which knight it is. But it's a story from the King Arthur book, or from the original King Arthur stories. I think it's Gareth, and the pictures are beautiful. And it's a little long, as is Young Lancelot. They're both a little bit longer than I'd like to do in one sitting. But my kids, especially my son, really likes these. So we've covered castles and knights. Now, throughout the year and as part of this unit, we incorporated some read-alouds that were really good for this. So I'm going to take a minute to share those with you. I already showed you King Arthur that we did towards the beginning of the year. And again, this is for older ages, I think. We also did The Sword and the Tree, which is, I guess, the opposite. It's kind of for younger. It didn't really engage us that much, but if you have a younger child, this might actually be good for them to read on their own, maybe like second, third grade. I'm really not good at like the levels of what the reading is. You can kind of take a look in here. My daughter could read this on her own now. At the time, we just decided to do it as a read aloud, and it honestly wasn't my favorite. I think it was just too simple for us. Igraine the Brave by Cornelia Funk is one of our favorites. We love this. I believe she also wrote Dragon Rider, which we've listened to an audio in the past and really enjoyed as well. And I think we've read this one before when my kids were younger and read it again. It's a really good one. I should just mention, it's about a girl who comes from a family of magicians, and she wants to be a knight. And they kind of are like, why do you want to be a knight? You can be a magician. But she ends up saving her castle and her parents and brother. And they do work together as well. And there's another knight and other characters, and it's delightful. This is one we didn't read this year, but we've read in the past that I also really enjoyed, and this is The Frog Princess. Now, this is what the Disney movie is loosely based upon. I think this might have been in some of my favorite read aloud, in my favorite read aloud video as well, because it is one of my favorites, and I mentioned there, I have mixed feelings about the video because while I love that they are incorporating more diversity and finally had a Black princess, they really diverged from the book quite a bit, and I really like the book, so I had mixed feelings on that. It's the same general plot loosely, but they changed pretty much everything else. But I would recommend this as a read aloud. I think it's fantastic. And there's a bunch of others in the series, and we actually had them on, we found them on audiobook from our library. So that's another way to do this. We also read Redwall again, and my husband owns, I think, almost all of these books. But we had read it when my kids were younger. Honestly, it's a little scary. So depending on your kids' sensitivity and ages, just heads up on that. It was like scarier than I remembered it being for some reason. When I read it, I think I read it when I was in middle school, and I don't think I found it that scary. It is about like mice and rats and ferrets and like different animals. So it's removed in that it's not people. But there are definitely scary parts and sad parts. And so heads up, but we do enjoy it. But yeah, I think, again, probably for older ages. We started this. This is Robin Hood. And The Merry Adventures of Robin Hood. And this is just a beautiful copy. I could not resist. And it is kind of fun. Like the stories themselves are fun. But this, with the language, was so hard for us to get to. So I started it. And we didn't get very far, but what I do have, I was sneaky and got this for my son for Christmas. This is Jim Weiss, and this is the Three Musketeers and Robin Hood. And Three Musketeers is a little bit ahead of where we're talking about in history right now. We're gonna get to that time period next year. But he really likes both of those. Like both of those stories are in here. And this is a much better way for us to learn about Robin Hood than this at this age. Like when they're older, this might be a fun challenge to read through, and probably would get more out of it. But where we were right now, this was not working, and this definitely did. As part of our Castles and Knights unit, we talked about medieval food, or we learned about medieval food. So I have The Medieval Feast by Aliki. We really like, Aliki's a really good author and illustrator. And so I recommend their books in general. And this is beautifully done. And it's just a story of the king coming and all the things that they need to do to prepare and cook the giant meal for the king. There's some examples. The other thing that I would highly recommend is checking out Tasting History with Max Miller, which is another YouTube channel, and I've mentioned him before because I love him and my kids love him. And he is also a great homeschool resource. He may not know this, but he is. He has videos where he takes a recipe, a historic recipe, and he cooks it and he tastes it. But in the middle, while it's cooking, basically, he gives you a history lesson related to that recipe. And I would pre-screen because some of his episodes have more adult content. He's not aiming it at children. He's aiming it at adults. And so I don't blame him at all for this. And I really enjoy watching all of his episodes, regardless of whether my kids watch them or not. But he has several on medieval dishes. And we made a few of those and also made some things from other resources and made a feast. So we made trenchers. So it's bread that you use basically as a plate. And so we made trenchers. So I made like a kind of like a tort thing. I will put on the screen along with it what it actually was, and I will link to the episodes I used below. It was surprising and kind of good. We made that. I'm trying to think. We made like a poached chicken in like, it was basically in like honey milk. It was like poached in honey milk, and that was delicious. And we put that on top of the trencher. It has even more medieval recipes on there that we haven't tried, and I might just for fun this summer try some. And he also has for different time periods. So if whatever time period you're studying, go check him out. Just want to mention that there, and that we did make the meal and it was fun. So that was everything we did like in our Castles and Knights unit. But I do have other resources that I included in other areas. So as we went on, I did end up reading to them a Cathedral, which is also by David Macaulay, much like Castle. It goes through the building of a fictitious but highly realistic cathedral, like how they would have done it. And we did this over several weeks, and it is beautiful. And this is another one that he redid in color. And it really reminds me of Notre Dame, which I think is the point. I think it's supposed to remind you of Notre Dame. And which reminds me, when we were doing this, I also showed them a video of Notre Dame. And I think I had done it when it burned. I think I had showed them because I was sad about it and wanted to share it with them. But yeah, we looked at that. And I don't remember. I'll see if I can find the video I showed them. It's just on YouTube. I just searched for it and checked it out ahead of time. I do really like these books. We did use this several times. This will pop up a couple times in this video. So this is Vincent Starry Night and Other Stories, A Children's History of Art. And this goes through, and it has short stories on, sometimes it's on specific artists, and sometimes it's on other art, like specific art, I guess. And so for this, along with Cathedral, we read The Stained Glass Makers of Chartres. I don't know if I'm saying that correctly. My French is not great. But yes, it's about stained glass makers. Let me see if I can find it for you in here. Here we go. So yeah, it's just about how they would make the stained glass, which is really cool. Really cool. And yeah, that's it. They're really short, so they're really easy to incorporate with whatever you're studying. And it goes from, I think, like prehistory to modern times. Let me just double check that for you. Yeah, it starts at like the first artists in the caves, and it goes all the way to 2014. So this is a really good homeschool resource. I highly recommend. Along with the Cathedral book and doing the short story about Cathedral stained glass, we did a project out of Artistic Pursuits, Art of the Middle Ages. This is the kindergarten through third grade, volume 3. And I have a review of their volumes 1 and 2. I will link here. I really like them. These pop up a lot in my videos as well. Let me see if I can find that specific lesson. Of course, I'm having trouble finding. Oh, there we go. And so it has, all the lessons have like a piece of art that you look at, and it has information about it and questions to ask the children. And then it has an activity to go with it. And so we did this activity where we cut out and put tissue paper. And what I did is, instead of like gluing or taping it on, I think it has you glue them, I had them put it between 2 pieces of contact paper. And then we put them in our window, and it was pretty. And I'll insert a picture here so you can see that it was pretty. The next topic I want to share resources on is medieval manuscripts. This kind of goes in conjunction with cathedrals and monks as well, because monks in medieval Europe were writing a lot of the manuscripts. This is a resource I've shown in several other videos, mostly of my units, my ancient history units, because it does have like short chapters on different writing. Well, let me just show you. So it's got the Sumerians in cuneiform, the Egyptians in hieroglyphs, the first alphabet, the Romans in writing, and of course what's relevant to us here is monks in manuscripts. So it's just a couple pages, starting here. I really like this part of it. It's like, you are a novice, and it talks about how you're, sitting and learning to write, and they have pictures. So again, this is another great resource just to have on hand for history that can, we didn't get to this yet. We're going to get to the printing press when we talk about the Reformation. I love these next 2 books. They are gorgeous. The first is The Ink Garden of Brother Theophane. So this is about a brother. They're all working in black and white, or brown and white, just like no color. And he gets tired of that. He keeps staring out the window, and he goes and he collects different plants, and he makes dies from them, and he adds color to his manuscript, and they all love it so much that they all start doing it. So it's a fun book, and I really like the illustrations, how it really echoes that. Plus, I love gardening, and look at his garden. Sorry, okay. If you're interested in gardening, I have a gardening channel, and I'll have it's below in the description. But honestly, it's gorgeous. The Ink Garden of Brother Theophane. The other one we have for manuscripts is Marguerite Makes a Book. It's different, but also gorgeous. It's about a girl, Marguerite, who helps her father, who is an illustrator in Paris. And I love, love, love. It's very different style pictures, but I also love these. And she has to go to all the different places to get like the hide that they're working on, right? The calf skin. And she gets egg to mix with different ingredients. She goes to the apothecary to pick up different ingredients for dyes. And then it shows how she makes the dyes. And then ends up with this beautiful result. And there's some information in the back, but mainly it's just a beautiful story. For a project to go along with bookbinding and manuscripts, I combined several different lessons from this Art of the Middle Ages book, and I just want to show you what we did here. So there's something called bestiaries. I want to say bestiaries, but I believe it's pronounced bestiaries. This shows you a little clip of one from the book. And so what I did is I had the kids make their own. And in doing this, I used not only this as inspiration, but we used the bookbinding lesson, the bookbinding lesson, as well as, let's see if I can find it, two different things here. For the book covers, we used this lesson to make kind of reliefs and put it together in a hardcover book. So let me show you what we came up with in the end. I have both of them here. I might still get some, I don't know, they had jewels on there, so I don't know if I have something I can use as that. Let's put them on it. But okay, this is my daughter's, this is my son's. The relief didn't work quite as well. I don't think we got the glue quite as thick as you're supposed to, but it's still pretty cool. And inside, they just have, I didn't really care what the content was so much. The inspiration was the bestiary, so it's something mostly animal or creature related. And my daughter had wrote something for each. I think my husband wrote this one for her, but she came up with what it says, and then she wrote this one. So you can kind of get an idea of what she did there. My son, I don't think I had made him write no, we just have the titles, I think, in his, and he decided to paint his. She just drew hers. I think some of his are Pokemon, which again, I'm fine with. I just wanted it to kind of have that feel like a bestiary. That was the goal. So that's the project we did from that, and that was really fun. And actually the binding here, you can tell, is the yarn from that project, and they really liked binding it that way. They needed some help, but that's something they want to do again. So that is a good project for manuscripts. So the next chunk of resources I want to share with you is to round out different people and events in our history study. So the first time period we talk about is the Crusades. We learned about several people in the Crusades. One is Eleanor of Aquitaine, and she is in this book here, Outrageous Women of the Middle Ages. And this has been in some of my other videos as well. It goes through by area of the world, and let's see here. And it just has like a short chapter, kind of story-ish. It's like the story of their life on each person they have in here. And there's these pages where they give you more information in general. So this is just more information on the Crusades. Eleanor of Aquitaine was married to two different kings. She was married to the King of France, and they went, I think it was the Second Crusade, they went together and then they fought and it did not go well. And then I don't remember if he died or she divorced him. He probably died. And then she ended up marrying the King of England, and she's actually the mother of Richard the Lionhearted and King John, who's the bad guy in Robin Hood. So yes, so she's an interesting person. I think I showed this in my last video as well, but I'm going to show it again because it's around the Crusades, and this is Saladin, Noble Prince of Islam by Diane Stanley. I highly recommend all the biographies by Diane Stanley. They're awesome. And Saladin is, he ended up fighting. He's from modern day Turkey, and ended up working for the Sultan, and then he ended up kind of being in charge of Egypt at one point. And he's basically trying to, like, this is the time of, I want to say the Fourth Crusade, I'm not 100% sure, but it's the crusade where Richard the Lionhearted came from England and went, and they're trying to take, I think at the time they had Jerusalem and some of the parts of the land closer to the Red Sea, I want to say, the closer to the water there, and Saladin was trying to get this land back. So he fought with Richard the Lionhearted, and it's really interesting because I mentioned this before, but when you're learning history in the United States, at least, they really focus, like when you're learning this time period in history, you really focus on the Crusaders. You don't really learn as much about the people who were there. Like the Crusaders, he went all the way from England to go take this land, right? And I get that it's Holy Land and it's complicated, but like there are people there, they're living there. So yeah, it's about Saladin. It's beautiful. It's well written. It's really useful if you're studying this time period. Learn about all sides, basically, is what I'm saying. So that I love that. Okay, my husband has the baby for right now, so that's why he's not here anymore. The next time period I want to talk a bit about is the 100 Years' War. It's from like the early mid 1300s into the 1400s. And if you don't know what it is, don't feel bad. I didn't until we studied this. And it was basically a fight over who's going to rule France. The king died, and there was a dispute as to heirs, and the King of England claimed that he could take the throne of France. And this went on over many monarchs for many years, for around 100 years. So, but some of the characters that you will see, some of the historical figures, are Henry V and Joan of Arc. And so those are who I highlighted. First here we've got Joan of Arc, and this is another Diane Stanley book. And this is fantastic. Oh, and it has a pronunciation guide up here, which is really helpful. I definitely used that. So if you don't, it made me want to watch the movie with Lily Sobieski. I don't know if you remember that. I think I'm saying her name right. I don't know if you remember that. It's an older movie, and I don't think it's kid appropriate, but I just remembered it, and for some reason made me want to watch it, which I haven't, but maybe I will. Joan of Arc. If you have older kids, I would just screen it first. It's been a while since I've seen it. But yes, Joan of Arc. And there's a really good, like, kind of author's note in the back of this too, of talking about how she was made a saint and like absolved, and her conviction was basically said to be fraud. So yeah, this is really good. For Henry V, what we actually did is we used this Usborne's Complete Shakespeare Stories book, and let's see if it's still on, if the ribbon's still on Henry V here. It is. It's on the end. It's the play in story form. And it's got at the beginning of each story, I think these are all of Shakespeare's plays in this book. It has like an introduction to the characters, and then it goes through, and it's not in Shakespeare's language, but it does have some like quotes that it does pull from Shakespeare's language, but it's not written in Shakespeare's language, if that makes sense. So we also read that. After that, I did want to expand a little bit more on the War of the Roses. So I did pull out Story of the World, Volume 2, Middle Ages. Now, if you watch some of my other videos, and history specifically, you know, I used the Story of the World for ancient history for my daughter's first grade year. And this year, I have both this and Curiosity Chronicles on hand, and I had mapped out how to use both, and I ended up mainly just using Curiosity Chronicles because I much preferred it to Story of the World. But there are some areas where it doesn't go there's a few things that they cover that are different, right? So I decided to go back to Story of the World to read one chapter. We read chapter 27, The War of the Roses and the Princes in the Tower. And the War of the Roses, again, is in England. It's between Lancastrians and, I'm forgetting, Stuarts maybe? Okay. I don't remember the names, but there's the White Rose and the Red Rose, and they're fighting. Basically, at the end, Henry Tudor takes over and starts the Tudor dynasty, if you will. So that ends up going through, Henry VIII and Queen Elizabeth and such. So I just wanted to make sure we had a foundation there, because we will be talking more about Henry VIII and Mary and Elizabeth and all that when we get to Reformation time, Reformation Renaissance unit in the fall. Okay, so there's a few more people I want to show you resources on. The first thing I want to show you is actually, it's on several people, but this is another Jim Weiss audiobook. This is Swordsmen, Saints, and Scholars, Great Men and Women of the Middle Ages, and it covers, this isn't just Europe. This covers Attila and the Princess, the House of Wisdom. I'm trying to remember. I was half listening when we listened to this, so it was really interesting. It's just not remembering the exact people. So it's the most influential person in the Middle Ages, the House of Wisdom, Hildegard of Bingen, Eleanor of Aquitaine, who I just showed you resource on, Maimonides, Brightest Light of the Golden Age, Sir William Marshall, and Cathedrals. So I recommend it. It's engaging and well done. And it covers a broad range of people. Let's talk about some more famous people in the Middle Ages and resources for them. So the first person I want to talk about is Hildegard von Bingen. So we actually did a composer study using her music and learning about her. And she was, I don't think it was called Germany at the time, but in modern day Germany, she had visions from a very young age that actually gave her really bad headaches. And she was sent to it wasn't a convent at the time, it was a monastery. She ended up founding a convent, and she not only wrote beautiful music for the women, for the nuns of her convent, but she also learned and studied and wrote about medicine at the time, which is mostly herbs. And I think she even wrote like a cookbook basically with recipes. And she also wrote a book about her visions. So she was an amazing person to learn about. And we did study her when my kids were younger, and I don't think they really remember. But I have a couple resources for her. So the first is The Secret World of Hildegard by Jeanette Winter. Let me do one at a time here. And this is a really simple book. It's not super long, and it has some quotes that I think are from one of her books. I'm not sure. It seems like they are. And it's just, it's a biography of her, of her life. Yes. There. And then I have another biography. You probably don't need both. I had this one from last time we studied her, and I just picked up the second one. And that's Hildegard of Bingen by Demi. I do like Demi's biographies. I've already shown you at least one in this video, I think. So here it is. And she was born, let's see, 1098. So yeah, I was just about the 1100s. We studied her as a composer, and so of course we listened to her music. And I actually just found pieces on YouTube, and so I will link some of my favorites below. She wrote, one of the things we watched, and I'm hoping I'm going to say this right, I think it's Ordo Virtutum. And it's actually a morality play. Also want to mention for Hildegard, there are some great adult books, or like they would also work well if you had like a high schooler. This is not though for the elementary level, but books that I read, and I love reading books that are related to what we're studying. I want to do it more. Haven't been doing as much this year. I'm hoping to come up with kind of a list of related books as we're going through the year for me to read. But Illuminations is one I read several years ago about Hildegard that I love. It's historical fiction. Both the ones I'm going to mention are historical fiction, based on her life and what we know about her life, and then the author fills out more details that we don't know for sure what happened, because again, like around 1100. And then the other one I just read while we were learning about her this year is The Greenest Branch, which is actually the first part of a 2-part series. So it's actually like only half of her life, which I didn't realize at the time. So at some point I'm going to get the second one, but I'll have those all linked below so you can check them out. And then there's also, I mean, there's lots more on her now. So you can also get like a cookbook. And I did pick up a nonfiction book, but I didn't get to it. The historical fiction is more fun for me. So that's what I've read so far. Okay, so that's Hildegard. The next person I'm going to show you research for is St. Francis. If you don't know who St. Francis was, well, he's now a saint, but he was a monk, and he founded the Franciscan order, and they're very much about poverty, not owning and having a lot of things, is how I would. But he was also like, he wrote all these canticles that praised God. Like so up here is Canticle of the Sun. There's also Canticle of the Animals. But he was in what is now Italy in the medieval times. I'm not Catholic, so those of you who are Catholic probably know better than me all this. But I studied in Italy for a little bit in college, and I was in Perugia, which is across the valley from Assisi. I learned a little bit about St. Francis while I was there. And I just think his writings are beautiful. And so he is that medieval times. So I thought I'd introduce him to my children. I think this is the last person and the last couple of books I have for you today. And that is Giotto. Now, we also do artist study, and several of the artists we did this year ended up being Renaissance, which we're going to get more into in the fall. But Giotto is during more medieval times. So, I have a couple resources for Giotto. This is a picture study portfolio. It's from Simply Charlotte Mason, and it comes with, I tried these out for the first time this year, and the main reason I got them is because it comes with these pictures that are high quality. Like, this is pretty thick, like cardstock, and they're beautifully printed. And it comes with, I want to say 8. It comes with 8 pieces of art that the person did, and they have several artists. And then it comes with this book, and in the book it tells you like how to do picture study, and this is very like classical Charlotte Mason picture study. Emily Kaiser, who put these together, is they have a pod. She's on a podcast, and I am forgetting the name of it right now, but I'll have it linked below. I've listened to many of their episodes. They're very much, I would say, Charlotte Mason purists. So that's the perspective that this is coming from. But it goes into how you would do a picture study. And then they have a story, an autobiography of the artist, Giotto in this case. And we did read this, and it was okay. I liked the other books that I have better than that. But it also has ideas for books. And then for each of the pieces of art that it comes with, it has kind of a description. This is one of the longer descriptions. Some of them are much shorter. But I really like that. It's helpful to me, especially if it's an artist or something that you don't know, or a piece of work that you don't know a lot about. It's helpful to have that just basic information. Now, I will say that these are a little bit on the pricey side, so heads up on that. And I don't think they'd be strictly necessary. I think you could print out your own pieces. A lot of these artists have, you can find them public domain pictures online for free, because obviously they're so old. Giotto's 1266 to 1337, so obviously online and public domain. And I also have some picture books, so you could just do that. But I decided to try it out this year just to save myself from having to print them. Giotto and medieval art. So this is actually great for during medieval studies, because it does have a lot on Giotto, but it's not just Giotto. So it has some of his contemporaries, and let me show you, because it's much more like the resource books you see. It's not really a story, and so it's helpful in putting him and medieval art into like context. So it kind of goes into what's happening before, And then and this is really good also in conjunctions with the artistic pursuits book, because some of the stuff that's mentioned in here, there's lessons for, or you can come up with your own art based on like some of like art projects based on some of this. So yeah, we finally get into some of his paintings back here. So that's Giotto in medieval art. If you were only going to get one resource on Giotto, I would get this. This is A Boy Named Giotto, and it's, you know, I mean, I would also look at his artwork. But this is more of a storybook and more of a living story. And I believe the illustrator really tried to make it look, I don't think it's really a perfect approximation, but I think they were trying to make the figures look like Giotto's figures. I don't know if I could show you on here. Like, I don't know if you can see some of his art there. But I do feel like that's what the illustrator was trying to do. And you can see some, like, the gold up there. It's a story of Giotto as a boy and his love and desire to paint. So it doesn't go through his whole life. It's just basically how he became a painter. So that's A Boy Named Giotto. Okay, so the last thing I want to talk about in this video is games. I love playing games with my kids. We play more, I think, during the winter, the fall and winter, than we do during the spring and summer when it's so nice outside and I'm really gardening. But I have a couple games that are great to incorporate when you're studying medieval Europe. So first is chess. This just happens to be no stress chess, and I really like this for kids. Interestingly, chess, I believe, actually originated in India, so you could also incorporate chess when you're talking about, I think, medieval India is when it came to be. But, you know, it has kings and a king and a queen and knights and rooks and castles, and yes, chess, good start. The next one is probably my favorite in the stack, and that is King Domino. Now, I actually got this for my kids for Christmas, and we played it a bunch of times. I really, really like it, and it's perfect for their ages, and we enjoy it too. So it's not like, so like, for example, my 6-year-old, and he was 5 at the time when we started playing this for Christmas, and he can play it no problem. He probably doesn't think through as much in advance as we do. Like, it, you know, the older you are, the more practice you have, the more you can like think ahead and plan out. But with more practice, they're both my kids are also improving in that. And but we can all really play. And I should probably explain a little bit. It's a game with tiles that you have to put. You end up with like I think it's a 5x5 square. It's been a couple months because gardening. And there's different kinds of land. So there's like forest and plains and water and such, and all different ones. And you have to put them next to each other. And then at the end of the game, you add up, you get to multiply the number of squares that you have together with the number of crowns on the squares. There's crowns on some of them. So you're doing math as you go. And if you are more advanced at thinking ahead, you're actually doing math during the game, because you're thinking, if I take that tile, it's going to get me that many points, whereas that one's going to get me that many points. So it's also a good math game. But King Domino, it's, you know, king, so medieval Europe. This one is really made for adults, and we've played it with my kids. I think it's better for the older ages, but I'm sharing it because I really enjoy it, and it's Sagrada, and it is beautiful. So let me take out one of the pieces just so you can see. So everybody has one of these. There's colored dice, and you need to fill up your tile in a certain way. There's like a card you stick behind here, and you need to get certain like numbers and colors, and you want to get certain patterns, and then there's certain objectives for the game for, like, you know, getting in a row, or points for so many of one color, and so on. And it's hard to explain, but you can go look it up. I really enjoy it, but it's basically, it's like a cathedral, right, with stained glass. So that's kind of the whole idea and how I'm connecting it back, why it's connected to this unit for me. But it's a beautiful game. And if you have older kids or, you know, you just like playing games yourself, I highly recommend it. It's called Sagrada. This one's also more of an adult game. This is Splendor. It's not quite as difficult as Sagrada, but it's definitely more difficult than King Domino. So we've played it with, I think we've played it with our kids, or at least one at a time. I don't remember. My husband and I like to play this one as well. I would say it's more like Renaissance themed in a way, because you have these like characters, but it's not really about the characters. It's really a game where you're trying to collect cards that represent gems basically and have points on them, and the first person to 15 points wins. But you like have to collect gems to get the cards, and so there's a lot of math in this game as well, I would say, and thinking ahead as well, some strategy. I have to say my husband's much better at this than I am. Must be something that he's really good at in his brain. But yeah, it's got like these characters that are kind of like Renaissance level, like Renaissance ladies and lords. Let me see if I can. So that it just made me think of like medieval times. So these are ones you can try to collect. So I thought I'd put that in there as well. It's another good game for math and thinking skills, I guess, and with also a little bit of a Renaissance or medieval twist. I almost forgot this game, but wanted to add it on. This is my first Carcassonne. There's obviously also just Carcassonne, but this is great for kids, and it's just a tile placing game where you're trying to connect paths, and then you have a color of person, and as you get people, as you finish the paths, you get your people. So I'm not describing that super well, but I will try. But if you're curious, I would just go look it up. I'm sure other people have done reviews on it, and you can see how it's played. But this is a really easy one for kids, and it's kind of set. You can kind of see it's like set in medievalish times, with their. Oh, here, I'll show you the back. Shows you some of the pictures. Just it's like there's animals everywhere. They're trying to collect the animals in Carcassonne. So that's what I have. It's a lot for one video, I know. If you've made it this far to the end, thank you so much for watching. Please click the like button and subscribe if you haven't already so you don't miss more content coming up. Oh, until next time, I will talk to you later.